approval of the minutes of our last meeting. They've been perused by...
I've seen them. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the Selectmen's meeting on June 12th.
And I'll second them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then we have an update on the action items, which were... Oh, there's the minutes. Action items. Nobody had anything to do.
Nice. Phew, I'm good at that.
Last week.
I'm good at that.
I have one thing there. Tomorrow night is a presentation by the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust on groundwater protection, drilled wells. They did a whole study, got a grant, did a study for all the towns in the valley, and our presentation is tomorrow night. So, George, come on down.
Is it at the Whitney or here?
At the Whitney.
What time?
Oh, I think it's at 7:30.
Okay.
I appreciate the invite. Well,
Tomorrow's Wednesday.
the truth being, I would have invited a lot of other people if they were here. But you're here, and they're not.
Probably starts at 6 and just doesn't want us to be part of it.
No.
I think it does.
Oh, yeah.
It's my
I
guess.
can't make it. I am.
Okay.
No.
Our building inspector has been called away, Kevin Bennett, but
Collapsed building.
we have his signature on 2 new building permits, one for Tierney at 732 Lower Highlands, new siding, window, garage door. And the second one is for Kimball at 40 Cameron Drive, reshingle the roof, add additional solar panels.
Kind of
Things.
segue.
So that all will be moving ahead. And then we have new business, cemetery plot and pillion in the village cemetery. We need to sign it. No reason not to. Okay, the next on new business is Revision Energy. Dan Weeks, Joe Sorrell.
Great.
They're here to enlighten us.
Glad we could fit him into our packed agenda this week.
Maybe I should just start really quickly. Just that I've worked with Dan in Revision and Joanna just a little bit in my professional capacity in my work at the Charitable Foundation and working with donors who have an interest in solar energy projects and working with nonprofit organizations to install solar at their facilities to lower their overall operating costs. So to date, I've done probably since 2017-18, we've probably done about 25 or 30 solar projects of varying sizes with nonprofits all over the state. Dan and I met, and he's fed me a bunch of really good projects in working with nonprofits in New Hampshire. He's also, done a lot of projects municipally. So I thought, maybe it would be great for them to come and speak to you all and to us about the potential for solar and what it could mean for the town and for the campus here. So,
All right.
Now, are you both out of the same office?
no. Oh, me?
No, I'm going to talk to Joe and Dan. You're from,
So to introduce ourselves, we're both from Revision Energy. We and 250 of our good friends own the company. It's an employee-owned company based out of Maine, New Hampshire, and most recently also Massachusetts. I'm our Director of Market Development based in New Hampshire.
And I work with commercial project development based in Portland, but I live on the other side of Dundee.
So I was up north. Maybe I can just jump in here, and was glad to combine today's visit with a couple of other clients, City of Berlin, Mount Washington Hotel, and some others that we're working with in Lancaster as well, and to meet my colleague and friend Joe, who is more local to the area. What I thought I might do, Peter thought that at this stage, the big screen here is I'm afraid all I've got, but hopefully it's usable, better than nothing. If you're like me, I prefer to see some pictures to see what we're talking about instead of just the words.
would you tilt that just a little bit at Hank? No,
For the,
because I'll follow it.
is
But
that
he might be able to.
maybe?
Yeah, you get a camera to look at. There you go.
Okay.
And that way our huge viewing audience.
Huge, millionth of a person.
We can also send you the slide deck too.
No speakable
good.
content will be
Thank you.
found on the screen.
What is going on?
No speakable.
All right, let's
Don't argue with that.
see if we get this thing going. Apologies for not coordinating in advance on a bigger screen, but hopefully this is useful enough. In any case, Peter thought it might make sense to just give initially an overview of how a New Hampshire town typically goes down the path towards solar as a means of saving taxpayer money, also helping the environment, as well as who Revision is and what we might propose here on the town campus where we stand today. So by way of a quick introduction, Revision Energy, Joe and I are two of about 250 co-owners, and I mention that because it's important to us that when it comes to actually building the systems, the guys up on your roof or in the field doing the install have an equal stake in the company and what we do, and making sure that anything we're building is going to be good to go for the next 40, 50 years, which is how long these systems are expected to last. We've built over 8,000 solar projects so far, mostly in Maine and New Hampshire. We like the northern climate, although we are reaching south now into Massachusetts as well, and have been honored to be rated the #1 rooftop installer in New England and receive other awards. Our mission, Peter mentioned this in terms of the nonprofit work that we do. We want to see the entire region make the clean energy transition toward real homegrown energy independence. We know we have the capacity. It's a beautiful sunny day today. In fact, the stat is, it always blows me away, we get enough sunlight in an hour to power the world for a year, if you were to harness it all. So even in New Hampshire, pretty far north, about the 43rd parallel, we still get plenty of solar power to meet our needs as we do at my home or other larger installations. So we want to help the region make that transition, and a big part of how we do that is to specifically work with nonprofits to bring the cost as far down as we possibly can, to bring impact investors in the game who are willing to not make any money financing the system, but make sure that it's accessible to nonprofits. And although solar is the biggest part of what we do, we've seen a lot of complementary technologies. It's great to see a heat pump here in this space, where you can very efficiently use that solar electricity, not just to turn on the lights and computers, but also to heat and cool your space, to charge electric cars. I came up in my Chevy Bolt, and we want to make those also as accessible as possible. Very briefly, some of the nonprofits we've worked with, various schools, universities, towns, etc. And then on the business side, some good companies like LLB. Anyway, without further ado, when we look at a new potential partner, like a town here in Jackson, usually the first thing we'll do is get on the phone to our engineers, look via satellite at the available sites, the rooftops or ground mount areas. Peter and also Kevin, who I spoke with, suggested we focus on this campus, and there could conceivably be other opportunities out there, but you always want to find the low-hanging fruit fruit, what could be conceivably built in the next 6 or 12 months, and where's the return going to be realized. And so what we did here in Jackson, a satellite view of where we are today, I'm sure that looks pretty familiar, the town complex. We took these 4 main facilities, the fire station, town hall right here, the library, and then the garages out back, the road agent. And our engineers put together a prelim design where, just based on some good satellite data we have, we're able to define how much solar we could install, and critically what the generation of that solar array would be. We're able to draw on very extensive databases which give us production data for this particular location, latitude and longitude, the pitch of the roof, so we can come up with a very accurate model of what the actual production will be. And you see on these 4 roofs here, we're ranging at the small end here in the town hall. It's a small system of just over 12 kilowatts with production of about 15,000 kilowatt hours per year. 2 at the large end, the garages out back at about 50 kilowatts with production of about 61,000 kilowatt hours per year. The library is pretty good size. You have a bit of a lower production ratio because it's an east-west pitch. So you're losing about 20% of what you would get if it were due south, but still plenty of space on that nice new metal roof. So quite a bit of opportunity. When we put them together here for the complex, the total size of these 4 roofs adds up to 128 kilowatts of DC installed capacity. That's about 400 panels. Each system has its own interconnection point, since my assumption is, although please correct me if I'm wrong, that we're on 4 separate meters at each facility. So you would tie them in directly to the meter. You'd be powering the load in real time. The inverters, I'll show you a picture in a second, are converting that DC electricity to AC to provide power in real time. Anything excess is being exported over your existing power lines, sent out to the grid, and is helping to power the neighborhood. On a nice day like this, you're probably a net power producer. At nighttime, on a rainy day in winter, you're going to be drawing power down from the grid through net metering. And this gives just a sense of your production over the 12 months of the year. Obviously lower in winter because of fewer daylight hours, but still fairly good because in this case we're looking at pitched roofs where the snow is going to shed pretty quickly. Just to give a sense, I think you know what these systems look like, but some similar sized installs. This is a church we did. This is midway through at the National Soup Kitchen Shelter. It's where I live and volunteer, although my roots are up here up north. And then a little further along in the install process, the inverters I mentioned are the brains of the operation, if you will. They're taking that DC electricity, converting it into AC to power your load in real time. When we run a cash flow, you'll see that is the one item in the total solar array that we anticipate needing to be replaced. It's about a 20-year life, so we build that into the cash flow. The rest of it, the racking, the solar panels, it's tempered glass, aluminum frames. They're built to last 40, 50 years, and we have equipment in the field that long that we can go back to. And then just the specific modules, if you want to talk more, get into the weeds about the kinds of panels that we're typically installing these days and the inverters, I'm happy to do so. So if that's the kind of quick overview of what we see as the opportunity in terms of available roofs and how much power we would generate, to briefly run through the preliminary financials, when we work with a tax-exempt entity, a nonprofit that the Charitable Foundation may be partnering on, a town, a city, a school, the biggest hurdle we see is that because you're tax exempt, you can't access what are the most significant tax incentives available for solar today. It's primarily the federal investment tax credit, which is 30% off the top of the system cost in year 1. And additionally, if you're a business, you can take accelerated depreciation, another 20 or so percent. A city or town, a nonprofit, just doesn't have any access to those incentives. And so the workaround that we and others have used over 100 times in the case of Revision Energy, and in case this sounds like an end run, this is actually a tool developed by the federal government at the Department of Energy, the National Renewable Energy Labs. as a solution to indirectly unlock those tax incentives for tax-exempt entities like a town. And the tool is basically a power purchase agreement. A PPA consists of your nonprofit host teaming up with a solar investor partner. Most of our projects, a little over 100 that we've done, either Revision directly has served as the impact investor, where we're happy to take 0 or near 0% on capital so that we can fulfill our mission, which is bringing solar to more organizations. In some cases, it's impact investors around New Hampshire, as well as in Maine, who believe in solar, want to see clean energy accelerate, and so they are willing to take a very low return on their capital and provide the financing and provide their tax equity. They're essentially tax equity investors who can take the tax incentives and then pass the savings on to the nonprofit. So for the investor partner, what they're doing is providing the capital, they're forming an LLC, and they are the ones who are building, owning, and operating the solar array for a minimum period of 5 years. That's what the IRS requires in order to take the full tax credit and be able to pass those savings on. Starting day 1 of year 6, the town or nonprofit has the opportunity to buy the system out from the investor. And frankly, the sooner you can buy, the better, because from the moment you own the array, you're generating free power, as opposed to in that initial PPA agreement, you're paying a below market rate for that electricity to the PPA owner. The investor is made whole by taking those tax credits, by receiving the electricity payments from the town for those first 5 years, or longer if the town chooses, as well as what modest, in New Hampshire at least, modest REC renewable energy credits are available. So that's the basic PPA structure. When we take these 4 rooftops, plug them into our financial model, looking at the production and looking at current electric rates in the New Hampshire Electric Co-op territory where we are, what you see combining these 4 roofs is the orange line here. You're saving modestly in the initial 5 years, the PPA term. The reason for that is we usually find it's in the best interests of the nonprofit or the town to set that electricity rate under the PPA as close to your current grid electricity as possible. You've got a budget, you're meeting your budget with tax revenue every year, and so instead of saving with a reduced rate up front, we want to bring that buyout as low as possible. But there's flexibility if the town wants to turn those dials, save more up front, pay a little more in the buyout. But typically what we find works best is modest savings in that 5-year period, and then the buyout option. And again, from the moment you own the array, the savings accumulate much more rapidly. So in the case of these 4 roofs, 128 kilowatts, we see 25-year savings on the order of $350,000. That's the warranty period of the solar panels. And then over the minimum expected life of the array, the savings are around $800,000. The key assumption there is what happens to grid electricity, because of course we're comparing the cost of electricity from the utility. We always model a conservative 2.5% a year escalator, or annual inflation in grid electricity. Recent years we've seen it closer to 3.5%, 4%. But when we go back a couple of decades, 2.5 seems to be a safe assumption. We don't know what happens in the future, but to just represent these numbers one other way, one of the perhaps biggest values of solar is that you're hedging against future rise in grid electricity costs. We're able to predict very accurately what your long-term cost of electricity under solar will be. We know what it costs to build the system. We know what the production of that array will be. In fact, if we're producing at less than that and the panels aren't operating as they should be, the manufacturer is replacing the panels, so there's a guarantee around production. And so we're able to accurately model what the cost, the long-term levelized cost, if you will, of solar will be. In this case, 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour over the next 40 years. If you went with that early buyout option in year 6, if you deferred and took the PPA all the way to 25 years, which is the typical term of PPA, your electricity rate would be about 11.5 cents. If you did a turnkey purchase, instead of going with that PPA financing option, just decided to buy the system outright, and your long-term cost would be about 7.5 cents. And that compares to current rates of 14 to 16 cents a kilowatt hour from the electric co-op. Or if you assume, as is unfortunately likely to be the case, that electric rates continue to go up, your long-term cost is going to be more in the 23-cent range, averaged over the next 40 years. So that's really where, from a town and nonprofit standpoint, the real benefit derives in that you're locking in a much lower rate of electricity for the next several decades, 6.5% compared to probably around 23%. So really, that's the basics. That's based on our initial design, the work our engineers have done, and the financial model, assuming conservative estimates on what it costs us to build. We often see the numbers come down a little bit. We want to be conservative from the start. I'm pretty darn certain they won't go up, but that's what I think the worst case scenario of what you would see if installing on these 4 roofs. And then if you're interested, just some more on our own experience installing these previously. I mentioned over 100 projects so far in a number of municipalities here, schools and nonprofits. So that's the basics. Happy to obviously answer any questions you have for Joe or me, or if it's something the town wants to explore further, a couple of next steps that we can also talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The town decides to go further, do we get you back for real
Yeah. So
consulting?
what would we do? So we provide as much free development work as we possibly can. I'll try to push our engineers to give the best designs up front so you have a good idea of what's possible. We do typically, if the town knows that you want to do a project, there is more work beyond what we've done, obviously, for today to go into locking in what that cost would be, what the PPA rates would be, etc. Typically, we'll see a town pursue an RFQ, request for qualifications, where you'll assess. There are a number of good solar companies in the region doing good work and assess their qualifications. And then by selecting a partner near the beginning of the process, what that allows at least us to do when we receive an RFQ opportunity is to do the full development work up front, to be essentially your developer partner. In this case, it would mean spending more time at these 4 facilities, obviously checking out the electrical infrastructure, doing close inspections of the roof and structural. We always get an independent structural review. We need that PE stamp before we put any additional weight on the roof. So there's a lot of these steps. There's the utility interconnection, local permitting, etc. So under an RFQ scenario, we'll do that work from the moment you choose to work with us, and then typically there will be a letter of intent where the town stipulates certain savings goals that you have that we believe can be met with this project, and provided we're able to meet them, and when the final proposal comes in, having done that development work, your commitment is to move forward with the projects, and our commitment is to meet those financial goals, those savings goals. If RFP is your process, typically towns in that situation would go out to a third-party consultant to do more of that upfront development work, determine exactly what it is you want to get bids for. Some towns will say, no, we think we can do it in-house. We'll put out an RFP, and we respond to these every week. Because most don't have the in-house expertise to design, to do the initial development, we find that it typically adds more cost at the end of the day and a lot more time to go with a third-party consultant. That's why we're seeing more RFQs these days. Pick the developer and go from beginning to end. But that's obviously your decision.
So none of these roofs have really good orientation. I mean, I walked around and looked at them. Yeah, they just don't have, they have some orientation, but obviously the library, if they turned it half a turn, it would have that whole face looking at the sun. This building, same thing. Have you thought about a yard array of some sort?
That's what I was thinking.
So that was brought up. I spoke with Keith and with Peter. That's something we're happy to present as well. We do find that to do a ground mount, there's a lot of additional equipment involved. And so smaller systems, the price per watt to build them does go up. Now the production is a bit better too for the reasons you noted. But with setbacks and everything, our initial sense was that the space is probably too small to make good economic sense. And I know there's doing a nice patio at the back of the library, for instance. There, you tend to get more local objections too, for obvious reasons. You're taking up space that could be used for a nice lawn. We're happy to do that, to run those numbers for you. I would say that, with the exception of the library, the production ratios on these other three facilities is pretty well in line with most of the projects we do. It's not perfect, not perfectly south 40 degrees, but it's south-southeast, south-southwest, enough of a pitch to get pretty good year-round production ratios. So, with the exception of the library, which frankly has the advantage that you can do both east and west if you're trying to just get more total production. The ratio goes down, but the total capacity goes up.
The other piece too is once we understand how much electricity the town is using, then we can say, oh, looks like with this one roof, we can actually generate that, and it doesn't necessarily matter the orientation because we're generating it anyway. And just because of the orientation of the roof. Literally, you add a couple more panels these days, and you make up for loss in orientation. And once we understand how much electricity you're actually using, we may already be there without having to worry about that production number or that production orientation.
Well, that would be some homework for me,
Yeah.
to get our electric bills together and figure out, how much each building's using.
And Kevin has those preliminary numbers. I know he's looked at all the kilowatt usage for the 4 buildings, just because I know he was in contact with me.
The number Kevin's, I guess, Keith, forgive me. The number Kevin gave me, ballpark for the town is about 100,000 kilowatt hours a year. What these 4 roofs give us is actually under 50,000 kilowatt hours.
Right.
So maybe you drop the library or another
Yeah.
one.
Well, that's what we'd have to weigh out is,
Right.
okay, you put $30,000 into an array on the roof of the library, but you're not getting the same that if you just did it here or up at the garage, and you'd have a better cost payback or
That's true.
So the collective kilowatt hour amount of 150,635 or whatever it was, that has been determined by an equation that also factors in the direction that those roofs are facing. That's not a standard number, right?
Correct. That is, and happy to send you, we try not to print except when we have to save paper, but sure, we have the detailed production estimates for each of these 4 facilities. And you'll see a different ratio on each of them. The kilowatt hours they produce per kilowatt installed. At the low end, the library comes in a little under 1,000 or a little under a 1-to-1. At the high end, we're at a little over 1,200, so about a 20% delta between the most productive, which I want to say was the road agent roofs. This one's pretty good as well. The fire department is a little flatter, a little more southwest facing, but they are individual.
And they total 200 panels.
400
Wow.
400 across the field.
And if you were to locate this project on the ground, you said there really wasn't enough room out there, and it's really going to crowd it. Any idea how many panels there is room for out there?
The tricky part about ground mounts, especially when you have limited space, is they have to separate from each other quite a bit because they're in the shade.
Right.
So you think you have all of this room, but when whenever you use the actual road,
Stack.
you're going to have to push that
Space it
back a
out.
bit. Yeah.
And also you want, ideally a pretty good setback from the southerly trees because they're on the ground 3 feet up to about 12 feet, which can be a lot more, especially when they're shaded in these roofs.
So you do solar tracking and you get the efficiency of always facing whatever the sun is, winter sun, summer sun, that was looking at, so there is something to be said there.
There certainly is, and we're happy to model that. Most of our ground mounted installs are not trackers, although we do a number of dual axis trackers. They're your fixed ground mounts. Basically, it's a much lower install cost, lower maintenance, no moving parts. Trackers do give you maximum production, but it's a bit long to payback.
And so the tax break for an individual, you said was a rebate of 30% of the install cost in year one. And is that the only, so there's nothing in years 2 through 5?
For the tax break, no, the investment tax credit.
Investment tax credit.
A business, including an impact investor, can additionally access the bonus depreciation. And that has also been compressed into year one under the recent tax bill. It used to be up to 5 years, but they're required to hold the asset for at least 5 years. Otherwise, they pay a penalty for each year. Hence the year 6 buyout option, but not 6.
And have we recouped the install cost after 5 years?
Not in full. So the buyout figure, which is incorporated into these financial models, is right about 60% of the day one install cost. So you're getting about 40% discount on the system cost. Some of that is through your electricity payments. The bulk of that is through the tax incentives that the investor is able to monetize. And then there is a little cost of capital that they're building into the equation. But that's reflected. You see the dip here in the cash flow, so you have that buyout.
Oh, so the chart basically shows that we're back to square one 15 years out. Is that
Yeah, we'll break even.
Yeah, so I think the best way to interpret in the PPA scenario, you've got a cash neutral, slightly positive first 5 years, and then you have a payback period of, in this case, about 10 years, so to speak. And the electricity savings then accelerate.
So in year 5, then, we buy out our relationship with the PPA with a lump sum.
That's right.
So that would be a warrant. Is that typically what municipalities do?
Typically, yeah. A larger municipal system, they'll float a bond, maybe a 20-year bond, and then their savings, the project remains cash positive throughout its lifetime, and then once the bond is retired, savings accelerate more rapidly. Yes, we'll often go through town meetings. Sometimes a town will say, even though we're not buying the array, we want to get town approval at the outset for the PPA. So that's something we also see. But certainly that purchase would be a town meeting appropriation.
And does that represent your current best cost estimation there, $400,000?
Yeah, so that's when we have our engineers do the prelim design, they also give us a cost estimate specific to that type of install, location, and so on. They're always conservative to start. I would expect that to come down a little bit, but we want to be conservative in presenting numbers.
Well, that's good, because people remember that first figure you give them. I mean, they lock into it.
Right.
And, oh, no, it's going to be a little, oh, you said.
I know.
So it's good to be conservative with those first figures.
So if we end up covering the 100,000 kilowatt hours per year with our 3 most productive roofs, what would be the advantage for also covering a roof in the library? Or that showed both roofs.
That shows all of us.
Yeah.
Of the library.
That showed both sides. The reason we showed all 4 is to give us kind of the upper bound.
Yeah.
The numbers from Kevin were very preliminary,
Sure.
very rough. I don't know if they included the school. Typically that adds quite a bit of load, 300,000, and the high school it could be 1 million kilowatt hours. So if there was additional load, we at least know what's possible at this site. You are paid for every kilowatt hour that you export.
Right.
paid less than what you paid the utility. So there is a return on excess production, but it's a bit longer than production that's directly offsetting the load.
And your bar graph showed that, that lower cost because of the higher amount of kilowatt hours the project would produce, right?
So what we've built to, again, try to be conservative in our financial model, this assumes that half of the electricity produced on these 4 roofs is not being used in real time.
Okay.
So we're selling it in that moment to the utility, we're getting paid less for it, we're building that into this model. Otherwise, your utility rate would be 16 cents, not 14 cents is our assumption here. So what you're being paid by them is actually about 12 cents a kilowatt hour, assuming half of it is being used in time. The average then, your blended rate would be a 14 cent kilowatt hour offset.
Okay.
We can dial that in. Typically, a next step would be, if the town's wanting to look further, would be to collect all those electric bills, to compare the on-site production at each individual location to the consumption, be able to come up with an accurate offset ratio, and then give a very accurate cash flow.
Up the road by the grammar school, there's a building, the Whitney Center, which has a great roof exposure. Maybe as you leave town, you might just drive by, take a drive by, and go, oh yeah, that's, I don't know, 800,000 kilowatts right there. No, but it'd be something to look at, because that is a town facility, and the school, though a separate entity, is still paid for by the town. And it's right there, so that might be worth looking at.
Thank you. That's a great thought. I'm just on satellite here. Don't need to take your time with it, but I'm curious.
This is a good preliminary, because it's more of an idea.
Is that a town building on school land or a school building?
I'm not going there, no. It's a school building on town land.
I thought that was school land.
I think the SAU,
That's right, it's
But I don't know that it's a town building. But
town building.
I think that's what it is.
Even though it's almost.
she'll go up,
right.
and
The owner is listed
Right
as
there
Jackson School District.
is
actually. We don't get
yes,
any
that is
electricity
the
bills or anything, we
building,
don't see
the
any of
Whitney
that.
Center.
That might just be because that's part of the agreement.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Perfect orientation.
Yeah,
Looks like
it's
nice.
the one, because I drove around and just looked at buildings for the town.
Yeah.
And that was the one that jumped out at me as having a really good orientation, so.
As does this one. I don't know if that's also town, but
I don't know what all the parameters of
That
the
bigger ram.
billing and, obviously they have its own meter, and
At the same time,
and we have to see, where we want to put it and where we want to put the money.
there is an advantage, obviously, to bundling multiple smaller projects together. That reduces the overhead cost to us, the legal finance side. It's a single PPA agreement. Potentially, the school could even be part of such a larger agreement. Sometimes we see that coming together. And in that case, the price per watt to build each, what our engineers gave us was, building this individual roof times. We're able to bring those overhead costs down, and the more facilities you add, frankly, the lower the unit price.
and school municipalities go into those PPA agreements also.
That's right. Yeah.
And it doesn't all have to happen that 1 year. You could probably say over a 2-year period, we're going to do these projects.
Sure. With some colleges, for instance, we've done multiple phases. We've been able to work with their legal teams and get the PPA structure in place initially, and then we just rinse and repeat for multiple projects at a lower cost.
So what would be next steps if we were interested in looking deeper in some of these numbers? And
I think our question would be, just have a couple bullets here, what what are your objectives? Does the town want to be 100% solar power as far as municipal properties, net zero, so to speak? Or, is it kind of maximizing the financial return, perhaps? We would generally, as a next step, get those electric bills for each individual facility and do our load analysis. That allows us to give you a more accurate cash flow. We would do the roof and infrastructure assessment, going through the electric rooms. Since these are fairly new facilities, it's very likely that they have sufficient service on site. I'm guessing 3-phase in at least some of these, but even on a system this size, you don't even need 3-phase power. So it's unlikely that there would be major speed bumps there, but that's part of our due diligence. And then really, we look for your guidance on what the proper procurement process is. Is RFQ an option? In which case, we'd love to respond, as I'm sure others would do. And then, if selected, we would, spend just as much time as possible at each of these locations, developing the projects and working with you to come up with the final list. Otherwise, typically with an RFP, we would look to you to give us guidance as to which sites you want to do, and then respond according to your parameters.
So I'm familiar with RFPs, request for proposal, but I don't know what an RFP is. And I don't know what the difference is.
Sure. And feel free to add to this, Joe. With an RFQ, you're assessing the qualifications and choosing a partner to develop and then eventually install the project.
So we make up the qualifications.
You determine what you're looking for in a design partner, experience, expertise, all that. And then typically in RFQ, the benefit there, especially with a project like this, because it's fairly specialized, we see a lot of institutions go RFQ if they're, looking for engineers to do a major new infrastructure project or architects. They're not going to design the building themselves. They're going to look for a qualified architect to do the design. Similarly, you would be assessing the qualifications, what we bring to the table in terms of being able to design and develop the project, and then saying, yes, we're satisfied with your qualifications. Typically, that would be accompanied by a letter of intent, where the town says, provided you meet these criteria, we will move ahead with your project. And that gives us the security to invest all the upfront resources in designing projects to your specifications and then knowing that they will get built.
Can you back into it? Can we come up with a budget? Say the town's happy to raise $250,000. What can we do with it?
Sure.
That would be a way to work it from the backside.
Again, with the PPA option, there's no capital cost to the town unless you choose to exercise that buyout in year 6 or thereafter. So, that's something that we would find out what your goals are. If you want to spend $250 at the buyout in year 6, in which case we can build up to about $350,000. We work through all that.
Okay. Cheers.
I definitely see like a public hearing information going on, and I guess us needing to figure out what our objectives would be for this, or what we feel are reasonable objectives for the town to have in a project like this. I guess is a better way to say it.
And if you're interested, we're obviously happy to put you in touch with other towns that have done these projects. There's, at this point, a couple dozen in New Hampshire.
Anybody in Carroll County? Joe, can you think
Off the top of my head, I don't.
There's a number of nonprofit projects in North Conway, for instance. We're working on the community center. We've been
Yeah, we started that.
the ski museum's looking at it.
And then, but as far as, I feel like we can link you with folks, and I feel like specifically municipalities, because it's a different conversation. We can find somebody, we can literally pull on a map and you can point and say, I would like to speak with this particular town because you'll understand more the dynamics of how similar they are to Jackson.
Yep.
So I feel like that could be a next good step is to pull up the map together and say, here's where we've done these projects and this is who we would like to speak with.
How long have you been working with municipalities in New Hampshire? Has it been 5 years? Love to hear from somebody that had a PPA 5 years ago, you know what I mean?
Yes.
How did
The
that work
first
out for
PPAs
you?
were 7 years ago now, so the first generation of them are just buying out now.
Okay.
We did, I think, 8 that first year, and 7 of them are buying out. The 8th might need another couple of years to finish their fundraising. But yeah, Durham is one of the first in New Hampshire, and they started with, something like this, 20 kilowatts in the library. They added a 650 kilowatt ground mount, and a gravel pit. They did the ice rink. So typically you do see waves starting small. I'll leave my card. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, the town doesn't have to do RFQ. If you said, we want to do solar as quickly as possible, we could put a formal proposal in front of you, and the town would obviously weigh in on that. More commonly, because it's a longer development process, we usually see that RFQ.
Yeah. And that would be useful when putting it out the bid to really satisfy the residents.
And I think you'd have to give us time to, kind of canvass the neighborhood, find out what people would really want to get behind. I think it's a good idea, and Peter thinks it's a good idea. These guys think, but,
Well,
we
always
have...
bringing things to town that cost money. I'm trying to, for once, bring something to the town that's going to save us some money.
And I also, we're always available as well because this is the first conversation and the education process on the PPA is, we're here as much as we can be and will be, and I'm literally will help.
We both have the opportunity to do a lot of these projects, so I think you can find him and do the ones.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you. It's very informative.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have to fill up the time somehow.
Yeah,
So
well,
we're going to do otherwise.
my phone's going off here. I just got a text from a guy named Clay Vetter. I don't know
Yeah, I
what
was
that's
like,
about.
I think maybe you hang out better than sometimes.
Now and then.
Do you know the school and
A final note, if I may, a big motivation for us. You can see a little kid on the way. I've got 2 little ones at home. Is part of why we're excited to talk with towns is, you're representing the whole community, and the more we see leading institutions being part of this clean energy transition, the more individuals realize that it's possible for them. So we love to see these as longer-term partnerships. We want to develop and install, but also, if you want any of us in the schools, we love to get into the schools, talk about solar, bring in panels, have kids, take a cruise in my Chevy Bolt and see what driving on sunshine is like.
Or get them on the program where they can track, the sunny day,
Oh, yes.
what are you generating, it just snowed, what happened.
Yep. We'll put those monitors up in the school
Yeah.
if you want, and have them log in and monitor what's happening.
Excellent.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, who gets the finder's fee?
I'm going to split it.
No way, I'll split it with you.
Thanks.
No, thank you very much.
did they tell you?
He did mention that at some point. Yeah. But that's not what his text was about just now.
Oh, really? Is he working again?
We're on a panel together with the restorative justice.
Right. Which is
Yeah. Other side of it. Yeah, right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Now you're up here just, what, 2 days a week or 5 days a
It
week?
totally depends on the week.
All right.
But he goes back and forth a bunch.
Yeah.
I'm back and forth a bunch.
Right.
So we'll be back and forth a bunch.
Great.
In tandem soon.
Yeah.
So,
We'll figure out the right questions and we'll get you back.
yeah, and literally, anytime.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much.
See ya. You don't have to remember everything, just remember that. Once mom comes,
Just-
remember everything.
It's amazing, like the percentage of forgetting that's becoming.
Well, you're already donating brain cells.
I know, it's terrifying.
You'll be able to go down the stroller before you have it.
That's right. See ya.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is a request from the trustees of the trust funds. Withdrawal from the trust funds. Dear trustees, the Board of Selectmen are requesting the following withdrawals from the trust funds as indicated below. $3,827.20 from the Bridge Repair Expendable Trust Fund 0034, see attached. White Mountain Lumber Company dated 5/23/18, invoice number 536282. Make the checks out to the town of Jackson for withdrawal amounts requested. And we need to sign that.
I'll make that motion.
All second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Here comes the money.
Here comes the money.
That's what we're operated. That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know how. The next is a request for an extended liquor license to Mallet Corporation doing business as Wentworth Golf Club and the Red Fox Bar and Grill to serve alcohol outside their licensed area at the Wentworth Golf Club for the 38th Annual Memorial Hospital Tournament to be held Thursday, July 19th, 1918, for the member guest golf permit to be held on, the two, and the second one is for the member guest on Saturday, July 14th. This function will be held in a temporary tent set up for the purpose.
The motion to approve the Wentworth Golf Club's license request for off-site alcohol.
All second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Bring it on. They do it every year, so we should stand in their way.
38 years, was it? 38 years.
And now
Lee Marvin's getting
we will delve into the tax abatements. Okay, we have 3 properties that will be receiving refunds. Davis, and Northern New England Telephone Operations, LLC, Fairpoint. This is a recommendation from our assessor, and I think we've always gone with his recommendations.
I'll make a motion to approve this tax assessment
And the refunds.
refund recommendations.
All second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sign it up.
Sign it.
They put me on top this time.
And it's not on the agenda, but you are here for Thompson House Eatery. No.
I am not.
You are here.
I do, no, I'm here for, my abatement is one of the ones that is not getting a refund.
Oh, okay. So you want
I'd like-
to speak to that before we move off this topic?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, these are the appeals for a review that were denied by Northtown. And again, I would like to go with our assessor's evaluation. And we have 5.
Well, there's 2 denials and 3 approvals, so just, so
Okay.
those all need to be.
I'm sorry, we have 5 altogether,
5 altogether.
2 denials and 3 approvals.
So I'd like to
Just-
speak to my denial, if that's perfect.
Not at this time. There is a space for public comment because we can't debate this here. It's not appropriate.
Okay.
But you'll absolutely get a chance. So let me see if I can put them in order.
If you look on the last page where the signature, where you sign, it's checked off whether it's granted or denied.
Oh, denied. Here's one. Was denied, which was Old Jackson Village Incorporated, Dinsmore Road. Of course, is the president of that, and our assessor denied that. I'm going to take a blanket vote on these. Does anybody, I can read off what the properties that were assessed?
Well, we voted to approve the 3 that were recommended for approval.
Right.
And we've got 2 that were recommended for denial.
Right.
And we have somebody here to speak to one of those 2.
Right.
So I would, since it's agenda related and on topic, I have no problem with, and would actually prefer to hear from the person here to speak before I vote on the denials. But we already approved and we're ready to sign those 3 that were
I
recommended.
don't think we have to vote on the denials. I don't think we just have to vote on the
Okay, there's
So the
the
denials
3.
are not
Right, I mean, they could be appealed, right?
Yes.
Okay, got
Right.
it. Got it, okay. Super. And so we'll hear from that person who will go through the appeal process, direct down in public comments. Is that the plan?
Yes.
Oh,
So there's the 3.
That makes sense.
To be
okay.
Actually, for the appeal process to go forward, we do need to deny.
Oh, we did.
That's the way, we don't have anything to do with
Got it.
the appeal. It is not in our knowledge.
But wait, can I ask about that then before you sign it? So, one of the things I'm unsure of is it looks like I can appeal to the board rather than appealing to the court, which would strongly be our preference. We'd rather not take the next step to the Carroll County Superior Court. So, is it possible to appeal to the board? Which is part of what I'm reading in the questions and the answers page from the website.
Does it say board of land and tax?
Does
The
it say-
BLTA, does it say?
It says,
think they meet with the assessor first.
I can appeal to the Superior Court or the board. How do I appeal to the board? You have to apply an application by September 1st. And it can be obtained from the board's website.
Yeah, that's the Board of Land and Tax Appeals, and there is a website that they have. It's not this board, it's the Board of Land and Tax Appeals.
It's called, yeah. Oh, so it's a state? Yeah, so can I ask, is it possible to ask you not to sign it?
In order for you to appeal, we have to sign it.
So there's no way for me to discuss this further within the town?
Oh, yeah, if you come in and we'll set up a date,
Okay.
and
Oh,
then,
great.
and we will do that. But
Okay.
the process would ask us to sign the denial and then to have that appeal from you.
Okay.
And that's when we would sit and listen to your
Great.
side of the story.
Great.
Yeah, I think you're right, John. I think that I can remember one business that did want to take issue with the recommendation to deny, and we had voted on it. And Jason came back around, and
I think he met with them.
it didn't actually end up in court. Yeah, I think he ended up meeting with the owners and giving it another fresh look, and then rewriting something else. So there is recourse
Okay, that
before
was
we
my,
get to the court system.
great.
Or we have been involved in that before, where there is recourse
Okay.
that avoids the court system.
And I can empathize with the idea of keeping it in town rather than going to Superior Court.
Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Clarification.
So, we have the two denials that I would like to pass along to you.
Sure.
I'm ready.
Motion?
Make the motion to sign those denials through our assessor, Jason Quinn.
And I'll second. And so the owners are James and Jenny Glazer on one of them,
Yes.
and the other owners on the other one.
Was the Old Jackson Village Incorporated.
Got it.
Nestle,
Yeah.
which we've gone through before.
Right.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? I'm going to sign it first.
You sign first. Good kids. That would be bouncing up the road.
It's all written here. Okay, now we have,
Schedule some time to meet with Jason.
old business, which is the transfer station updates.
I have nothing new on that front.
I've been up there, it seems to be functioning. Everybody has an opinion. I think it's a real good effort at making recycling work.
Have the compactors all been moved around?
Yeah, the cardboard is to the back now.
Okay.
So you do bottles and plastic and cans and then cardboard and then over to the gun store. There's a jam up there on Sunday. I have a question. For people to pick through the dump store, are they supposed to have a dump sticker? And there were 3 vehicles from other towns, obviously not Bartlett or Jackson.
Yeah, they're supposed to be.
Yeah, that was an issue.
Yeah, I thought it was too.
But you could be out of state, Jackson sticker.
Yeah,
Right, you could be a visitor, but
you're supposed to have a sticker
these were
Right,
all,
to go through that dumpster.
Right, but you could be out of state and still have a sticker.
Right.
but these were obviously, people would say, oh, let's go up to Jackson on Sunday, it's a good picking.
And that was the problem.
Yeah.
There were people coming from towns around here that didn't have stickers, weren't from either town.
I think at some point, I mentioned it before, that we'll have to get a revamped sticker system since, we're redoing everything around the, at some point when we're all done, make that a mandatory thing again. Reissue new stickers at some point, probably.
Okay, that's our update. Public comment. Public comment is a time when town residents can bring matters before the board. Comments should be short and to the point. Speakers are allotted up to 2 minutes each to make their comment. Except in unusual circumstances, any matter presented under public comment will not be debated or acted upon by the board at the time it is presented. All remarks and dialogue in public meetings must be respectful and courteous, free of rude, personal, and slanderous remarks. Inappropriate language and/or shouting will not be tolerated. Furthermore, no person may offer comment without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting. With that, I will open it up to public comment.
I dare you.
Yes.
I am Yetta Glazier.
Yeah.
And I would like to state that my husband and I found the review conducted by Jason not to be fair, consistent, or applicable, some of his comments in the review, to our property and its assessed value. I also would like to suggest that maybe a different process for Jason in getting in touch with homeowners who file the abatement process allows a little more time to meet with him. I was called on the morning of Thursday. I wasn't told that I had an option to not let him into my house, which as a woman alone with kids is just a factor for me. So he came over in the afternoon. I didn't expect him to come in, and I didn't know this was my one and only opportunity to meet and discuss with him my application before this meeting and his review would be signed. So some additional information from him in that process would be really helpful. But mostly we found that the comparable sales that he gave to us moreover did not show that our assessment was in line with other assessments that he showed us as comparables. And so we would like the opportunity to appeal this review without going on to a level outside of the town of Jackson.
If you'll come in and talk with Julie, she'll get you the proper paperwork, and you will move ahead with that process.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming and being so patient.
Thank you for being here with us.
It was a good solar presentation. And if you add solar to your house, we're trying not to assess you for that. Public comment. All right.
Can't comment at town meeting, you can't comment here at
And with that, come on, somebody speak up.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Hey.
Okay, there it is.
All right.
Way to go.
Thank you.